सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Some weeks ago, I wrote and said over here that India was losing itself in a morass of hatred and loathing. I said also that things had got so bad that the hate had penetrated so deep that I didn't think anyone could stop it. I didn't think the RSS could stop it. I didn't think even the Prime Minister could stop it. I didn't think the preachers of hatred could stop it from all religions, because we had just taught our people to hate, hate, and hate. What I should have said, and I was reminded of that last week, is that politicians don't actually mind the hatred. They thrive on it. They flourish on it. You'll remember what happened in Parliament when Ramesh Bidhuri called Danish Ali names. Now, I'm not going to go and tell you the whole story because I imagine you know it. I'm certainly not going to repeat the terrible ethnic and communal slur he used, which is, I think, our equivalent of the N-word. But what happened? He got up, he called an opposition MP a pimp, many other bad words, and then he used this terrible slur. And next to him, two former members of the BJP ministry, Ravi Shankar Prasad, who was booted out some time ago, and Harshvardhan, who was sacked for his mishandling of the COVID pandemic, giggled, they chuckled, they laughed. And then he sat down and nothing happened. An uproar ensued. The speaker, who has shown great enthusiasm and speed in suspending MPs on a variety of reasons, though mostly it has to be said, opposition MPs, decided that despite this terrible provocation, what he would do was give him a gentle rap on the knuckles, would warn him not to do it again. And that was it. The government made no attempt to apologize, nor did the BJP. It made no attempt to even distance itself from this man and his remarks. The closest we got to any expression of apology was when Rajnath Singh got up and said, look, I'm sorry, I didn't hear what he said, but if for some reason the opposition is upset, well then I'm sorry. What do you mean? If for some reason the opposition is upset, if for some reason their feelings are hurt, how can you allow Parliament to reach this terrible low? I mention this because we are now in the wake of G20 referring to ourselves as the mother of democracy. Well, if we are the mother of democracy, look what our children have done. Imagine, take this remark out of the context of the Lok Sabha and imagine it had happened in another country. Imagine in the UK that a Conservative member of Parliament, which is the ruling party, had got up in the House of Commons and called a Labour politician a pimp. That alone, I think, probably have got him into deep trouble. But if he went further and used what? The equivalent of the N-word, what would have happened? Think about America. Supposing a senator or a congressman had got up and accused somebody on the other side of terrible ills and used the N-word, what would have happened? I think you know the answer. So why in India does nobody do anything? Why is Parliament allowed to reach such lows? Why do people get away with this sort of stuff? All that Bidhuri will face is apparently some show cause notice for which he has time to reply. And I think it's a fair assumption that his party will not expel him for having said what he did. I mean, the short answer is that India's politicians are willing to let the hatred flourish. They're willing to sacrifice by dividing our country. They're willing to sacrifice our future as one of the world's greatest superpowers because of short-term benefit, because they want to win elections. There are elections in Rajasthan, there are elections in Madhya Pradesh. They don't want to alienate the Hindutva faithful. Take the example of Bidhuri Pragya. She said before that she is on Godse's side rather than Mahatma Gandhi's. And the last time, one of the times when she praised Godse, the Prime Minister said how annoyed he was and how upset he was. and she was, I think, removed from a parliamentary committee. Well, she said it again. She said that Godse was a Deshbhakt. Godse was a Deshbhakt. And what happened? Oh, the BJP ignored it. Nothing happened. Why? Well, because there is an election in Madhya Pradesh. That's what's happened now. Political parties are happy to let this kind of abuse, happy to let this kind of hatred spread all around us because they think it works. And the sad truth is it works. We can have this kind of conversation. We can say how appalling it is. But if you polarize the electorate, the sad reality in India is you win votes. And so political parties will not do anything to oppose this polarization. In fact, they will support it. One of the most frightening things about the Bidhuri incident was the way in which the BJP's online army rushed to his defense. I mean, you can't really defend what he said. So one explanation was that apparently before the microphone was turned on or far away from the microphone, Danish Ali said something bad about Mr. Modi. Assuming for the purpose of the argument he said that, and there is no evidence he did. The correct thing to do surely would have been to report him to the speaker, not to use a terrible communal slur in response. And in any case, Bidhuri never even referred to this alleged insult to Mr. Modi. So the online army has now gone on to whataboutery. Okay, they say, you're appalled by what Bidhuri said. What about what the junior Stalin said? He said very bad things about Hinduism. Why aren't you appalled about that? Well, actually, I was appalled about that. I wrote a column saying he shouldn't have said that. But you have to see this in context. Stalin didn't use a slur against an individual. He went on and on about Sanatan Dharma and said, I think, completely uncalled for and unnecessary things. But if you understand Dravidian politics, in Dravidian politics, Sanatan Dharma has a specific context. It means that part of Hinduism which is hierarchical, which is caste-driven. And the Dravidian movement has for years and years said roughly the same sort of thing about their version of Sanatan Dharma. Now, the BJP knows this. The BJP, when these remarks were made, was in alliance with the Anna DMK, since the alliance is still broken down. So it knew exactly what Sanatan Dharma meant in the Dravidian context. But of course, they weren't going to let it go. The truth is that the BJP has hijacked Sanatan Dharma. It's acted as though it means Hinduism itself. And so, as I had predicted in my article, the Prime Minister attacked the India alliance and said that Stalin's remarks amounted to wanting to get rid of Hinduism. Others went further and they said that the DMK and therefore the India alliance wanted a genocide of Hindus. Now this is fanciful, it's ridiculous, but yes, I condemned it at the time. And even if I hadn't condemned it, would this be enough to allow the use of such language in Parliament? I don't think so. So what do we do? Well, I don't think there's much you can do to stop the hatred. The BJP and various other political parties are convinced it works, and perhaps it does work. And now that we are in election season, there's a lot to gain by whipping up hysteria, by using abuses, by dividing communities. That sadly is how elections are won in India. But I think there are many things we should do as liberals, and I'll come to them. Because I have a second concern. We've talked about Justin Trudeau. We've talked about his support to Khalistanis. But we've always believed, and I think that's true, that Khalistan is not an idea that appeals to India's Sikhs. None of them have forgotten the 15 years of terror that ruined their lives. Khalistan is a mad idea that is some appeal for the lunatic fringe of the Sikh diaspora, mainly in British Columbia. Now, unfortunately for the world, Justin Trudeau needs that loony element in the diaspora to keep his government in power. And so he behaves strangely, makes all kinds of allegations about India, allows these lunatics to do terrible anti-India things, to put up posters that call for the assassination of Indian officials. Now, that's fine. It's terrible, but it really doesn't affect us in India. And yet you sense, or at least I sense, that there is an attempt now to raise the Khalistan bogey, to suggest that Sikhs are Khalistanis, that they're enemies of Hinduism. From a purely electoral point of view, it makes a certain amount of sense because Punjab is the one state that has been immune to Mr. Modi's charisma. It's the one state where the BJP has no real stake. So they can say what they like about Punjab, they can create a Khalistan threat, and they can try and win Hindu votes on that basis. They've tried it before. This is what they did with the farm laws agitation. You will recall that the Sikh farmers who were protesting were dismissed as Khalistanis. Attempts were made to suggest that this was just one more arm of the so-called Khalistan movement. So you will see more hatred. You will see more division. What can we do as liberals? What can we do as people who are patriots, people who are committed to the idea of a pluralistic, united India? Well, I think we can stop giving the BJP ammunition. The reason I objected to Stalin Jr.'s remarks was because they were unnecessary, they were unprovoked. And he used the worst kind of language, whatever your views on Sanatan Dharma, to make a speech in which you say it's like corona, it's like dengue, it's like malaria, is sort of begging the BJP to turn it into an issue. Besides, if you are a modern politician in a country that is so polarized and that is so divided, why do you need to talk about religion anyhow? Talk about governance. That is what you're in politics for. If the BJP does political stuff that you disapprove of, the way to fight them is with good governance. But no, he didn't do that. He didn't do that because he wanted headlines for himself. And yes, he got them. So here's my worry. My worry is that yes, many people will try and legitimize this kind of hatred. Political parties will do it because they think it gets election victories for them. But liberals, parties that claim to be different, that claim to be pluralistic or even secular, to use that word, shouldn't play into their hands. And yet, unfortunately, that's what they're doing. They're handing this platform to the BJP on a platter. They are making the choice, Hinduism versus anti-Hindus. There is no such choice. We're all Hindus. Hindus are not victims. This is a Hindu country. For God's sake, focus on governance. Draw attention to the failures of governance. Let's have less hatred in our country. But of course, the way it's going, that's not going to happen.